think sometimes, again, with CFOs, remember it's chief financial officer, not chief accounting officer. This is so again, accounting to me is a science, finance, art, and science. And you're not just the cost cutter, the person who manages the budget and cuts costs. That's not what that role is designed to do. The role is designed to be a business partner for the owner or the CEO of the business to help scalable, profitable growth. And again, when it comes to cost cutting, sure, that's a tactic. That is not a strategy. That's a tactic to maybe get your cost in line, but that's not a long-term strategy to grow your business. You can't keep cutting costs on the way.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Expert. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7 and 8 figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Scott Chesson. And Scott, we're going to talk about a few things, and including business valuations and how to do them, and or why they're important, and also talking a bit about cash flow and credit, and how to use it, and when to use it, and or what to do and how to do it, as well as looking at a bit of strategic finances and what might be involved and what's considered there. So it should be a great conversation. And with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Scott.
Thanks, Devin. Again, pleasure to be back, and enjoyed being on your podcast previously, and looking forward to journey with you today again.
Absolutely. And for those that haven't caught, the Scott was on our sister podcast, The Inventive Journey, and so definitely encourage people to go check out his episode there if you haven't heard already. But for those that haven't had a chance to check out the episode yet, give it or take a minute or two and just introduce yourself a bit to the audience.
Sure. Again, my name is Scott Chesson. I run CFO for Vets, which is an outsourced or fractional CFO consulting firm specializing in veteran-owned businesses. I am a veteran and a son of a veteran. I was a naval officer to start my career. My dad was retired Air Force. And after I got out of the military, I had a 30-year finance career, of which the last 21 years were as a CFO of 5 medium-sized businesses. And about 3 years ago, I decided that it was time for me to get out on my own, be an entrepreneur, hang up my shingle, and see if I could make a go of it. And run a successful business doing outsourced CFO consulting on a part-time basis for businesses generally with revenues between $2 and $10 million. So I did that. I started it up, and it took a little bit, as it does with all businesses, to kind of get them off the ground. But I've been very busy for the last 18 months. I enjoy what I do. I enjoy helping veteran-owned businesses, veteran-associated businesses as well, and military spouse-owned businesses, of which I've helped some as well. So it's a fun entrepreneurial venture, and I'm really glad I undertook it. I'd been thinking about it about 5 years before I started it. So here I am.
Well, sounds like definitely a great adventure and a great place to be in life. And so with that as a great introduction, maybe we'll dive into the topics at hand for a bit. And so I think one of the things that, people can struggle across the board, whether you're just getting going with the startup and you're going out and pitching it to angel investors or venture capitalists, or if you're looking to bring on a partner, or if you're looking to make an exit, is the idea of a business evaluation. In other words, how do you go about evaluating the business? And sometimes it's easy. Hey, we have X amount of assets, or we have X amount of sales, and we try and take a multiple of that. Other times it's harder, especially if you get into service-based businesses, and how do you capture a lot of that value? But across the board, it's kind of things that come up for a business or at some point along the journey. So kind of walk us through a little bit of, if you're looking to do a business evaluation, I guess, what's first of all, why is it important to get it right, and how do you go about doing it?
Yeah, and again, there are a lot of back of the napkin ways of doing it, rules of thumb. And for a business that's been around for a while, you can probably take a multiple of EBITDA, which is really operating earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And that's one of the most common ways that businesses are valued. But those are, more mature businesses. They've been around. And again, it depends on the industry and it depends on the market conditions as well. So if you do a professional business valuation, which there's a whole host of reasons why you would do it, it may be you're entering into a buy-sell agreement with your partner and you want to kind of put a stake in the ground as to what the value of the business is at the time, what the parameters are if you decide to depart from one another for whatever reason down the road. So that's one of the reasons. But generally, you're kind of looking at three things, three different ways. One is I would call it market comps. It's like a real estate. If you can find a comparable business that have sold, or a series of businesses that have sold that similar size, similar industry in recent history, you can probably get a pretty good idea of which your business is worth doing that. It's a lot harder for smaller businesses. With bigger businesses, they may be able to go look at the publicly traded on the stock market, but if you're smaller, you look for comps, and it's not always easy to find. So you try to find a comparable business. So again, I think of it like real estate comps. Your neighbor sold their house for 600,000, and yours is very similar, and they sold it 2 months ago, and you're going to sell yours now. So that's one way to do it. Another way, again, is to ultimately get to discounted cash flows. What is the business look like? What is the growth potential? And then measure all that. And obviously, the other thing with business valuations is often when it's done professionally by a CVA or a certified valuation analyst, it comes in at somewhat of a floor, because you're going to discount for lack of control and lack of marketability, because it's a privately owned business. So that's a second way of doing it. And usually there's a third way that you look at it when you're doing the valuation, but it just depends on the business. It may be, like you said, it could be an asset-based business, and you do more of an asset approach to it, but that is less likely, particularly for services businesses. So you really look at all three of those things, and you come up with the best way. You handicap it. You may do a combination of the two and handicap it and come up with the best way and say, here's what the business is valued based on a professional valuation. So again, that's a way to do it. You will see a lot of back of the napkin, back of the envelope type ways of doing it out there now, and businesses will do a short circuit or something like biz equity. Can give you a pretty good back of the envelope valuation for your business. But ultimately, the ultimate valuation of a business is as you sell it, you get a fair market value, and it's a fair market value is in the eyes of the beholder, who you sell it to, which can consist of tangible and intangible components. We need to build a beachhead in DC. We need a company here we want to do vertical integration. We want to take 2 and 2 and make 5 with 2 similar businesses.
Now, one of the things you started to hit on, but I'd love to dive in because, I work with a variety of different businesses, a lot of different ones that are in the audience. But the one that I think a lot of times is difficult is if you're in the service-based business. In other words, there's a difference if you have a product, or, people are buying something tangible or software or something. They could say, okay, what is the number of sales? What is, how many do you often do? What is the trajectory? Is it on an upward or a downward trajectory? Kind of what are those things, because it's less tied to an individual. And yet when you get into a service-based business, oftentimes it's as much tied to an individual as anything else. In other words, hey, they come to trust the person that does their finances, or that does their legal work, or that that fixes their car or anything else. And if that person leaves, then it affects the valuation of the business because that person's no longer there and they may go somewhere else or look for someone else they trust again. And so when you're looking at kind of service-based businesses, kind of how do you go about that consideration, or how do you go about factoring that in, or compensating for it?
Yeah, and I mean, again, that's the sole proprietor's conundrum, isn't it? It is you're providing it, you're chief cook and bottle washer, you're doing everything. You are the value for the business. If you go away, the business doesn't really have any value. Maybe it has a little bit of value in the name, but as a general rule, you're not there isn't going to be a real arm's length transaction to sell the business. It's just there isn't a fair market value for that. So as you grow beyond being a solopreneur, you really have to make a team and make it into a business that is sustainable beyond. It's not just the cult of personality of the individual. And I talk to business owners about that all the time. You need to have a business that is well beyond just yourself if you want to be able to sell it. And the services business is a great example of that, where it happens. And again, the same. Well, let's say I wanted to sell my business today. I wouldn't be able to sell it for anything because it's just me. And it would be very difficult. Maybe I could merge it into another business and then help keep the existing clients, and you could get some royalties. But you're not talking about, I built a business with products. It's got $10 million in operating earnings, and I can get 7 times that, and that's 70 million. So it is very difficult, particularly as a solo service provider. You have to build it into a company, not basically a job for you in which you're a full-time entrepreneur and chief cook and bottle washer.
No, makes sense. And I think that's the conundrum that a lot of times, and some, when you're in services, it's hard because on the one hand, it's built on your relationships. On the other hand, and that's awesome and great as long as you're involved. And if not, then you have to either realize that that's where you're going to be at, and when you make your exit, the business goes away, or you have to set it up to be bigger than yourself. And so definitely some great thoughts. Now, one of the things that kind of goes along with that, a little bit different, but is also we talked a little bit more about, or before, a little bit about cash flow and credit and kind of the balance and what are the considerations there, and if or how and when you should use it. So walk us through a little bit as to kind of, for those that aren't as familiar, what is cash flow, what is credit, what should you consider, when should you use it, or when should you not use it?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, the first rule of credit is similar to credit for yourself as an individual. Always get it before you need it. So if you're a business, it's the same thing. You need a backup plan. And I think that's one of the tricks of being a small growing business is you may not do a projection. You're not forward looking. You're kind of living month to month, maybe out of necessity, or you just started the business and you're growing and finding your way. But it's always, when can I get bank a line of credit to give me a backstop, to give me a backup plan? And as soon as you can get it, you should get it. I work with businesses where I come in, and sometimes they're fantastic businesses. They cash flow well, but they have ups and downs, right? They have peaks of cash, and then they have where it's the valleys where they don't have as much, and they really could use a backup plan, such as a line of credit from the bank, where all that does is give you peace of mind, but it also helps you kind of navigate the valleys of cash flow, where maybe you're waiting for money from your clients to come in, and it's taking longer than you expect. So to me, it's always do plan your cash, look for 12 months at least. I'm not one of those plan for 36 months. I think that's probably not very realistic for a small business, but plan it out for 12 months and have a backup, have bank credit, have financing that you can use to help yourself get through the rough spots. And that's the other thing is, let's talk about just nuts and bolts. Anything you can pay with a credit card and float it and give yourself longer, allows you to hold on to the cash longer in your business, you should do it. You pay everything with credit cards that you absolutely can. That's another form of financing if you can't pay it in full, but at the same time, it gives you 30 to 55 days of float traditionally. Plus you get some rewards points, so you get a little bit coming back from that. But that is another way to kind of stretch your cash, and I recommend that for businesses to do that. Between those two things, that'll help you, elongate your cash flow a lot longer.
Now it makes sense. And so now the question is, sometimes the thing that I hear, or right or wrong, is that sometimes if you have that safety net, then you don't operate it, with this greater degree of urgency. So in other words, hey, I know I have this line of credit, or I know I can float it for this long, and so hey, I'm not going to be as judicious with my cash, or with the cash flow, or worry about it as much because I have that safety net, so to speak. Is there any validity to that, or is it a consideration that goes into it, or should you not worry about it, or any thoughts on that?
Well, I use this metaphor all the time, and people don't much care for it, but it's the truth. It's like an exercise plan with cash flow, collecting receivables, whatever. You have to do it. You have to do it consistently, regardless of whether you have a backup plan. That should be your backup plan. You could even call it, in some cases, your disaster recovery plan for cash. I wouldn't go that far, but it's really an emergency cash flow. You should only use it when you absolutely need to, and you should follow the principles of bringing in the money as judiciously as possible and spending it in a way that keeps you on a good standing with your vendors, but at the same time you're not sending it out the door before it's really due. It's same with paying your taxes. You don't really want to overpay your taxes. I look at it the same way, but it's back to that's one of the things that will help your business sustain for a long time, is managing your cash flow wisely, regardless of whether you have financing or backup. You don't want to fall into the trap, and it's easy to do that. I'm not going to worry about it as much because I have a backup plan, and the next thing you know, you've used your backup plan, and then you've used it unnecessarily because maybe you haven't brought the money in with the speed at which you should have, which you had the ability to.
No, I think that's a great way. In other words, it's a bit, maybe my context would be a bit like insurance. It's there for if you need it, but you shouldn't be counting on it, or you don't want to use it, or it should be something that you rely on unless it comes to that point where the events or create the circumstances that it's needed. So now kind of broadening that out just a bit, and one of the things you started to touch on as well is, just the general idea of, strategic finance. In other words, how do you go about being strategic, plan it out? You say for a lot of times for a startup or small business, you're going to look 12 months out, 36 months. I think it's going to be hard for any business, but particularly with a smaller a startup or a smaller business, there's just too much variation to it. But kind of what's involved with doing that strategic planning for finances, and what should you consider?
And again, I think that hits on another thing, that small businesses growing up, you get to a point and you go, I've got to be more strategic about looking and planning for success. That doesn't mean that people will say with the budget, if I don't meet my budget? I said, look, a budget's not etched in stone. A forecast is not etched in stone. Finance is art and science. It is not a pure science. So you need to put a budget. You need to put a marker in place to say, this is what I'm going to do. Right now you should be doing it for 2024 if you haven't already done it. What am I planning? What am I going to do in 2024? What am I planning to do in terms of revenues, profits, and cash flow? So I should do this every fall. And I think you can strategically do that to look forward, but you can also do like a whole SWOT, on your business, let's evaluate the business. It's a good time to do that when you're planning for the next year. So if you fall into the trap of what I call retroactive scorekeeping, I'm just keeping score of what happened last week, yesterday, last year, and you're not looking forward, then it's much more difficult to achieve strategically scalable, profitable growth, which scalable, profitable growth drives enterprise value and allows you to get to, if you ever want to do a sale, to give probably the maximum valuation, because they can see you've done scalable, profitable growth. You set yourself up for that, which in the future, and that's when you get, going back to the valuation question, that's when you get the maximum valuation. But really, it's just looking forward. It's planning for it. but it's also knowing that it's not etched in stone. And I can make changes. If something's not working, I can stop. That's the beauty of being a small business, much easier than being a very large business where it's like turning around an aircraft carrier. A smaller business, you can be agile and nimble and you can make changes, but look forward, put a stake in the ground, give yourself, do a, three scenarios. One is growth, one is kind of flat or maybe a little bit down, and then one is home run. All the stars are aligned. Do three scenarios and budget for the middle one. And again, I think it just helps you succeed. I know it does, in terms of just looking forward, planning for success, and also reviewing periodically enough to make those changes and not be something's not etched in stone. And again, the last thing is, if something's not working, change it. Stop doing it. A service, a product, you don't have to. And it's the sunk cost theory. Well, I already spent a lot of money on it. I need to keep doing it. No, you already spent a lot of money on it. You don't have to keep doing it. So that's really, those things, I think, all go in strategic planning. You can make tactical changes, but look forward and help drive your business to further heights and success.
No, I think that's definitely a lot of great pieces of advice, and some good takeaway on it. And so, well, with that, we're already starting to reach towards the end of the episode, and it feels like we barely started to scratch the surface. So we'll have to have you on again to one of our sister podcasts. But at least for today's episode, always like to wrap up each episode with the same question. So we'll go to that now, which is, so if if you're to look in the industry, what is the biggest myth and why is it wrong?
I think sometimes, again, with CFOs, remember, it's chief financial officer, not chief accounting officer. Again, accounting to me is a science, finance, art, and science. And you're not just the cost cutter, the person who manages the budget and cuts costs. That's not what that role is designed to do. The role is designed to be a business partner for the owner or the CEO of the business to help scalable, profitable growth. And again, when it comes to cost cutting, sure, that's a tactic. That is not a strategy. That's a tactic to maybe get your cost in line, but that's not a long-term strategy to grow your business. You can't keep cutting costs on the way. So I think that's sometimes the feeling is that's what the role does, is just manage cost and budgets, but that's really just scratches the surface of the things that a CFO can help you with. But really, the idea is to be strategic, forward-looking, and be a business partner, be a valued, trusted business partner for the CEO and for the executive team. That's what the job is supposed to do.
Awesome. No, I think that's a great myth to dispel, but also some great takeaways and some good pieces of advice. So, well, with that, now as we do wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Yeah, I mean, it's my website is cfo4vets.com, or in the middle, the number 4. That's a good way. You can contact me that way. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm on there and I'm posting content and sometimes dad jokes as well. I like to do that, keep it light, try to lighten up the world. And then, my email is schess84 at cfoforvets.com. That's my email. That's another good way to find me as well. So any of those ways are good ways to locate me if you want to talk some more, or even just ask for advice. Happy to talk to folks and help them out.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, and if nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again, Scott, for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you the listeners are out there, you can help us to share this expertise with even more startups and small businesses by clicking share, subscribe, leaving us a leaving us a review. Really helps us to reach those startups and those small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And on that note, if you ever need help along your journey with patents or trademarks or anything else with your startup, your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. We're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Scott, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you again. Great to be on your podcast again, Devin. Thank you very much. And everybody, protect your intellectual property. I've seen a lot of instances where long-term fights if he had been protected on the front end, it would have avoided a lot of that. So it's invaluable to do that out of the gate.
I'm in total agreement with you and couldn't have said it better myself. So thanks again, Scott, and have a good one.